This is a tricky issue. But it's important, isn't it? Because if I want people to have access to the activities we're doing, access to the gospel message, I need them to be in a place where they can focus and listen. Challenging behavior is a good topic to include when you're thinking about middle school, high school settings. Often with that age group, you can think for two sets of people. People you know have some challenging behaviors because maybe they've gone through some kind of an evaluation process and you know that they may have something like ADHD or an intellectual disability or whatever that may be. And then there's another category of individuals that I would just call it's hormones plus Red Bull or something like that, right? It's the age. I know so many of you are in those frontline positions of being able to hang out with that age group, and what a blessing. But I want to give you some tools, very practical tools to take back. I think when Psalm 139 talks about God knitting us together, I always say I suspect he used green and pink yarn, all right? Green for those things that we're really good at, our strengths. Pink for what I'll just call our hot spots, the things that are more difficult for us to do. And the truth is we all have them. So I'm going to introduce myself to you via puzzle piece. Green for me is anything having to do with words. I love words. I love to speak them. I like to read them. I like to write them. I love to play with them, right? Words are me. Pink would be anything having to do with eye-hand coordination. That is a total weakness for me. So when my kids say, hey, Mom, you want to play Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, it's because they will win and I will lose, right? Don't throw a ball at me. I'm not going to catch it, all right? That's my puzzle piece. Now, yours might be the exact opposite. You might say, put me on the church softball team, but don't make me stand up and say the congregational prayer. I don't know what that is, but we all have one. God designed us, green and pink. But I wanted to start at this place when thinking about individuals who may have some challenging behaviors, because I wanted to remind you of something. First of all, Scripture confirms that God did not make any all-pink puzzle pieces. But sometimes, maybe, especially in this situation, it can seem like that. Oh, it's just this glaring pink at you because of the behavior of an individual in the group. That's not biblical. God created each one of us to bring a gift to the body of Christ. But the truth is, especially for those who are leaders, I want to remind you of something too today. God does not make all green people either. And I say that to you because so often we think we have to manage everything, know all of the answers, have all of the pieces put together, and that is not how God designed any one of us. God designs us so that our puzzle pieces fit together. Areas where I can come alongside you, I will. Areas where you can come alongside me, please do that. We fit together like a puzzle in the body of Christ. So as we're thinking about individuals who may have some unique, challenging behaviors, I want to remind you of something. First of all, this is not an all-pink individual. This is an individual who's been handcrafted by God with gifts, right? An individual made in his image because this person is going to be placed and have an important role in God's kingdom ministry. This is an individual who we have a space of time with to help grow and learn, all right? This person is also one stamped all over them, along with all of our puzzle pieces, that is to be an honored and indispensable member of the body of Christ. That's who this puzzle piece is. This is not an all-pink person, all right? So hang this up on your mirror, put this someplace to remind yourself who this person is, a dearly loved child of God, and we have a space of time to spend with this person. Look for those greens in people. It's almost always easy to see the pink, especially in persons who have some challenging behaviors. I want to remind you of something else. All behavior is communication. That baby has 0 words to say to you and yet communicates very effectively, right? You can tell by that cry, something's got to change here, folks, right? Or even by that contented, smiling face, has an entire room engaged with this little one. Doesn't have to say a word, but communicates very clearly. And could you tell which couple might benefit from some marriage therapy, perhaps? Right? Even the way we hold our bodies, the way we interact, can sometimes give us clues into how we're thinking and how we're feeling. So this is my first challenge for you in this whole area of challenging behaviors. We got to be detectives, right? Slip into detective mode. What is that person trying to communicate? This is the behavior that we see, and sometimes very challenging, but what is that person trying to tell us? Could it be, boy, you should have heard the fight I heard at home before I came here? Could that person be communicating something like, I happen to be on the autism spectrum, and what happened was I'm pretty literal in the way I interpret language, and you just told me it was raining cats and dogs, so I thought I better get to a window so I could see what that looked like. That's why I ran out of the room. Could be a person who said, you know what, I'm a person who takes, for ADHD, Concerta, and it runs out after 12 hours, and it's 7 o'clock at night during your youth group activity. And I just want you to know I'm behaving this way because my medicine just ran out, okay? And if you are a youth group leader, 7 o'clock is that magic hour, is it not? You sort of feel that happen in a room where the meds just stop working. So one of those things is, what is that person communicating to you, right? I think, too, it can be hidden. It can be, I don't have the words to say, so I just hit you on the side of the head because I really need something. I don't know what that particular behavior is, but look beneath it. Look beyond it. Try to swim through it. Gather the facts. Please don't wake up in the morning and say, well, I'm just not a good youth group leader because this child hates me. They're always bad for me. No. Listen. They're communicating something to you. And by doing some detective work, is it a certain time of the day? What's going on? What's the big picture here? You're going to get some clues into what's going on. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do is to be a detective, okay? The other thing that I will highly encourage you to do is you have to begin by getting to know the individual. Makes a huge difference. Maybe the information you can have access to is that person's puzzle piece. What are they good at? What do they love to do? What things are difficult for that person? Might not even be able to have access to a label or designation, but you can have access to a lot about an individual if you can learn about their puzzle piece, right? So I don't know what that would be. I'm not going to talk about this long because we have lots of stuff on our table out there that will help you get to know that individual. But sometimes you can do it as a whole group and just discover puzzle pieces together. That'll give you a lot of information to go on. What an important thing, because I'm going to respond very differently to someone who is maybe has something like oppositional defiant disorder as opposed to an individual who completely misunderstood me because they have an autism spectrum disorder. So it's important to get to know that person before you can set up a good plan. So that's, to me, is the most important place to begin with a person. For that really tough customer, and I will tell you, by the time youth group rolls around, you've got a pretty good handle on what's going on. Most individuals have been evaluated by that point. They've probably got great plans that were set up by some psychologist. And where's the gentleman who suggested it was probably a female? But yes, that's probably true. In any event, many people already have a plan. So this is my plan A that I suggest to churches. Don't recreate the wheel. If there's a behavior plan out there somewhere, find out what it is and just adopt it for church, okay? You don't have to start over. Take those ideas and bring them to church if you can have access to that plan if one exists. My first thought for this church over here is, could you find that out? Is there a plan? Certain words that people use, a certain way the environment's set up. Bring that to church. Visit an environment where that plan is working well. Can you get permission somehow to show up at this individual school or home or a place where this person does some work, a place where this plan is working well? Can you show up and witness it happening? I think another thing that's important is the people that are volunteers, the people that are staff. You need to train them all until they're comfortable. It's interesting, in a church setting, we often have multiple leaders, multiple spots that people go. Who needs to know this information and who needs to be trained in this particular plan? And finally, one of my favorite ideas that actually a church tried was to invite a person into their church to be that individual's alongside person for a couple of weeks. That allowed the church individuals to watch what was going on, how that plan could be put in place really effectively. I always say, please don't make parents pay for that person. Find it in your church budget someplace. They already have enough things that they need to cover. But could you hire somebody to model how that plan works at the church setting? So that would be, again, this is the prime plan, right? If you can have your hands on this information, watch it in action, maybe have somebody come to your setting to show you how it works. What a great way to go. But it doesn't always work that way, right? So the plan needs to be bigger than that. But if you can get this, that's what I highly recommend, a place where you start. If you still need ideas for your plan, what can we do? Well, as you can tell from my puzzle piece, I know very little about sports, but I happen to enjoy watching football, okay? So this is what I've gleaned over my years. I know there's two parts of a team. You've got offense and defense. That's pretty good, don't you think? And not only that, I know that except if it was the Super Bowl this past year, the defense usually doesn't score any points, right? I know that that's true because I know that I think the offense is way more powerful. Now, we could maybe discuss this later, but when you're on offense, it seems to me you've got the ball, you can score the points, you can make elaborate plans, you can sort of switch them up, but you got the power and control on the field, right? The defense, that part of the team, all they can really do is sort of watch and respond to the way the offense moves. They can try to block something, they can try to prevent it from happening. But I really think that the offense is the ones that they've got the control, okay? I think about that in behavior management issues all the time. So often we spend so much time in reaction mode. The only thing we think of, well, if they do this, then I'm going to do this. We're put ourselves on defense all of the time, and we are way less powerful on defense than we are on offense. So I want to take our time together to talk about some offense strategies, as many as I can fit in this amount of time, and then talk about a couple of defense strategies, and a reminder, this is not going to work for every individual. You have to begin by getting to know, right. That's where you have to start. So I might come up with an idea and you go, that would never work. That's right, because you're matching it up right now with people. So on your handout or wherever you want to do, if you get this ding, 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 oh, that would work with Justin, write it down, because you're the one that's going to match up the ideas with the individual and put them into a plan, okay? So here we go, some offensive strategies. First of all, guiding principles of this set of strategies called love and logic. We spend a lot of times in our youth meetings talking about curriculum, what materials we're going to use, what outings we're going to use, but have we ever really talked about guiding principles for how we're going to manage behavior? I had somebody come up to me once in my role. I'm a special education teacher at Zeeland Christian School for a lot of my life, and they said, look, every time this student looks at you, I want you to put an M&M in their mouth. You know what? I couldn't do that because it went against my principles. I thought, I feel like I'm treating like this individual like they're less of a person. So I chose not to do that because it wasn't consistent with my beliefs. So think about that. The way you put discipline together, is it consistent with what you as a church want to convey via principles? Be prepared. I was the children's ministry director for 14 years, and I would always say to my volunteers, if you show up and the first time you look at that lesson is when everybody's coming in the room, you deserve whatever you get that day. Because you just took that ball and you handed it off to the other team, okay? I think being prepared is important. When people walk into something, they need to walk into a structure, into the ideas of what's going to happen. And we can talk more about that, but to be prepared is really important. I think it's also important to be prepared for maybe some of the individuals. If you know members of your group have bipolar disorder, you should know a little bit about bipolar disorder. Our table is full of that stuff. This is one of my favorite books. It covers a lot of different diagnoses that many of the individuals are being diagnosed with now: bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, Tourette's, ADHD, still use the word Asperger's syndrome in this book. But in any event, nice, a little bit about it by a doctor and ideas to try. So that might be a great resource for your church to have as you get to know some of the individuals. I think another thing that would be really important to do is to think about your physical environment. So often, as people were alluding to that, we have a big room, lots of noise, and not everybody's wired to like all of that noise, right? So could we think of creative ways to groom the environment so people might have some choices of places that are more quiet and those kinds of things? So think about your environment a little bit, sometimes dividing up that big space into smaller spaces with a different tone in each space can be more helpful. But consider that, especially if you have a lot of people that are doing this when they're in the full group, or just plain aren't coming in the room anymore because of the way the lights are blinking or whatever. So just think about the physical environment a little bit. I think, too, thinking about that is, what stuff do you have? Do all the chairs look like that? Because there might be some individuals who do a much better job hanging in there with you if they got to sit on an exercise ball. Or maybe you need some equipment like one of these, which is one of those wiggle seats that you can literally sit on. And the person for whom it works will say, wow, it moves for me, so I don't have to. All right? So this won't work for everybody. If it doesn't work, it soon turns into a Frisbee. Yes, there we go. So you have to put some parameters around stuff. But I think to have some options can be really helpful. The chair, in the middle there is actually wrapped with this stuff. It looks like an exercise band. It's called TheraBand. If you look at the chair you're sitting on, there's a middle bar, so this doesn't work well with that. But right where that middle bar is, instead of the bar, you can wrap this around really tight. And that way kids can slip their feet back behind it, sort of push against it. It's a great thing to use. So again, sometimes it's getting the right stuff in place so that you have some options for people, things that you know might be helpful. And how would you know that it might be helpful for a person to have one of those cushions to sit on? Because you started by getting to know the individual. And that was part of the process of what tools, what equipment might be helpful for this person to have. Very simple one is just meet and greet. Do you have all the youth leaders standing off in one corner trying to get their act together? Or do you have some people dispatched welcoming individuals as they come? I think that's a really important thing. Hear people's names. I heard that said a few times. How can we meet and greet? Another thing that I think can be helpful is to notice things about that person. I love that word notice. Hey, I noticed you often take your sister to Sunday school. That's way cool. Thanks for doing that. I noticed you got your hair cut. I noticed you love the color purple. It's my favorite color too. It's a wonderful way to build relationships with people by noticing. It's an offensive strategy. You've got the ball. You're setting up the environment for success. Another thing is to reinforce the positive, and here is my big caution. It's an important thing to reinforce the positive, but I had one person that decided as a leader that everybody was reinforced by giving them a big hug. All right? First of all, not always very appropriate at the middle school, high school level, and second of all, some people just plain don't like to be touched. So you say, great job, you did a good job, and you give them a big hug, and they're like, oh, get away from me. Let me remind you, you're using something positive to that person, not something that feels good to you. So you might need to investigate a little bit what is reinforcing or rewarding for that individual. Think of ways to add structure. The chairs you're sitting on are some of the least structured chairs you can have. If you add arms to those chairs, you now have 3 boundaries, and if you push them under the table, you've just added a 4th. So sometimes even chairs can be structured differently to help. Instead of sending everybody into the big gym to say, hey, we're going to go play a game, and you're in there and it's like they're playing chase all over, to set some of these parking spots down around the gym first, sort of get prepared and say, hey, we're going to go into the gym, everybody find a spot, and then I'll give instructions for the game we're going to play. Just organized or added structure to the task. So there's lots of ways you can do that, even having a schedule. This is a schedule, this is how we're going to do it. You're walking into something that people know what they're going to be doing on that day. If you have some people who really like to see the schedule disappear, you can make them out of Velcro and they can take them off when you're done with that particular step, and that way you've only got 2 more things to go. Okay? So I think that that can be a helpful thing as well. Another offensive strategy is to give information. Who here checks out their hotels online before you go there? Raise your hand and be honest. Yeah. We sort of want to see, in fact, you can use that great thing to tell where the parking lot is, what the beds are like. You can tell everything, right? That is helpful information for people before they come to youth group, or before they go on an overnight, or before they take communion, or before they make profession of faith, or whatever it is that they're entering, something unfamiliar. What great information you can give. We have a tool out there. It's not a book. It's an information guide called the Church Welcome Story. Younger kids on the cover, but the actual story spits out of your printer. You actually create it. This is the guide. So we did a few pages for you. My name is Jake, and I attend youth group at Shawnee Park CRC. Here's a picture of my church, Shawnee Park CRC. Sometimes we stay at church for Bible study, and sometimes we go to the senior center for outreach nights. Here's a picture. Here are pictures of our Bible study. So he has a chance to learn about youth group before he ever gets there. That can be really, really helpful. In fact, you can use it in lots of different ways. How about making profession of faith? This is the process. This is why some people do it. If it can be in a book form or laid out, and this is what people often say when they get up in front of a big group of people. And if you don't want to get up in front of a big group of people, you could do it this way. Communion story, overnight retreat. I'll tell you what, there's some people so anxious to go away overnight. So I said to this church, do you have pictures of where you went last year, and are you going to the same place? Yep. Do you sort of know the schedule, sort of know the meals? So they turned it into a story for this pretty anxious going into 6th grade individual who was like really excited to go after he read this story. If you don't like books, what could you do on your website? What could people preview by going on your church's website? What could they see? Pictures of the schedule, those kinds of things. What you want to know about the hotel is what they want to know about youth group. What can you plant on there? Okay? Some other ideas. Think of the word teach. So often we react to people who are doing something. I love this setting. The group was getting kind of loud, and the person picked up a remote control, aimed it at the group, and said, I've turned you all down to a 2. Later on, they were going to sing, and she said, I'm turning you up to an 8. Let's hear it. Okay? So again, teaching that there's a range for sound and that we can make it a 2 in here and we can make it an 8. How to walk in a hallway, how things, there's lots of groups going on, so this is how we're going to do it. Teaching can be a really, really valuable thing. And another idea is to just do the unexpected. So often, if I have to speak to a group of people and I don't know anybody, I'll pack a wrapped gift. Do you know, if I pull that wrapped gift out of a bag and just set it there, how soon I have people's attention, right? A spray bottle sort of has the same impact, right? Did you notice that, did you hear anything about purple dinosaurs on the news? Again, it's brain reason. You're trying to get people out of this sort of emotional goo and into a thinking place where you can often exhibit more control. But unexpected ideas can sometimes help that. Now, don't make them unexpected to you. You've got to think them out ahead of time. But to pull something like that out in front of a group can be really helpful. Develop relationships. Again, a lot of people are talking about buddies. I was so pleased to hear this person describe how they trained buddies, because I so often see it. Okay, I need 4 volunteers. Raise your hand. You're week 1, 2, 3, 4. And these people show up, and this person looks at this individual like, I'm really going to listen to you? So again, much more effective to get your people and go to that individual's house, take pictures of you guys playing their favorite PlayStation game together, or hanging out and building Legos with this individual, or whatever it might be. Take some pictures. You can come in, and the first thing you do is, hey, I really had a great time, as you're showing them that picture at your house the other day. I get to hang out with you today here too. So building relationships, I think, is really important, especially if you're going with a buddy system. Systems of rewards can be helpful. Again, make them appropriate. You can hand out youth group bucks, or whatever might be helpful to some individuals if it would be reinforcing to that person. That would depend on the individual. If they have a system of rewards, maybe you could put that together at your church as well. Having a sense of humor actually is a pretty good deal. So not laughing at people, but with people, often releases some wonderful things in the brain that allow individuals to sort of calm down. Think visually. So often we use so many words in a church setting. I talked about a remote control. What could we take a picture of? What could we show individuals? But also, shh. Well, that lasted about 2 seconds in this room, right? But if I had a traffic light up there, and the red meant, got to raise your hand to talk, and the yellow meant, hey, we can talk, in whispers, and the green was, hey, talk and have a good time. That is a permanent reminder of shh when I put it on the red. Does that make sense? So again, that's not going away. Another tool that I absolutely love, and you can get these actually downloaded on computers and iPads, this is called a time timer. And it's a visual representation of time. So if you know that in 15 minutes you're going to shut down the pool, air hockey table area, you can let the timer go, and when the red is gone, time is up. There are some people who don't have that 15-minute time running inside of them. That's difficult for them, a pink spot, shall we say. And so this is a visual way to let them see when time is running out. To really, detective work, think along with that person. Why did they just make that decision? Can I get an idea? Sometimes inviting somebody else to come in and just watch that person during whatever setting you're thinking about can be a very helpful tool as well. And this is one of my favorites. Can you assign a job? How could that person be helpful? Give that individual some responsibility, a way that they can join in. I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but I will tell you that many individuals who had sensory issues, meaning sounds are too loud, tags in the clothes bug me, so I'm going to cut them all out. I'm not putting my shoes on until the sock toe line is just right. All of those things can sometimes get inflamed as their body grows in puberty. So what had been under control, or medications that had been effective, sometimes go out of control for a season of time. So you may see more of this in youth group than they actually saw in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, because the body started to grow, and it's happening all over again. It's a real thing. It's your brain's interpretation of something, and most of us, we're wired in a great place, right at middle C. We can block out lots of stuff. We take in what we need. But there are some people in different sensory systems that they can't do that. And so in the area of sounds, for example, just a little bit of sound, and it's loud. And it is loud for that person because it's the brain's interpretation of that sound. So the ears are covered, and this is upsetting, right? So we have to think about that. If you have an individual that you're including that is like this, what ramifications does that have? What choices can you make for that person so that they can be a little more comfortable? But you see, you can be wired to be hypersensitive to sounds, but you can also be wired way below middle C, where it takes a ton of sound in order to register. A lot of those individuals talk in a voice about like this most of the time because they're not monitoring their own voice volume very well, right? Pretty much have to grab their face to get them to listen to you because it takes a ton of sound to register. This can be true in any sensory system. You've got people hypersensitive to things that are touching them. Those are your people who take the tags out of their clothes, right? You've got other people that are craving touch. So they're tackling people and they hug you and you think you just got the life squeezed out of you because they're hugging you so hard. But you need to remember that person, it feels good to him, so it must feel good to you. You need to be taught that that's too hard to hug me, right? We've got a great book called The Out of Sync Child. That would be a wonderful resource if I'm describing any people that you may know in your setting, but that's a really important thing. The out of sync child. And the other thing is, many times having some tools around can be helpful. I often say, you want to look at what that person is already doing. So if they're chewing the collar of their shirt all the time or their clothes are getting big holes in them, maybe you can find something better to chew, like a coffee stir. Do you ever see how many adults chew coffee stirs? They're pretty rugged, and that's a better thing to chew than your clothing, all right? Or if you've got a person moving around all over the place, maybe it's time to try one of those exercise balls because they can move around, and it's better than wiping out the 4 kids around them. They've got something that they can move on. Does that make sense? So you look for what they're already doing and try to find some substitutes for that. One of my favorite tools are for those individuals that seem to always need to hold something or touch something. These are called fidget pencils, and you can check these out there too. They're one of my favorite tools. They just put something to hang on to on the end of this pencil, and so the individual can twirl this around, and they've got something good to move instead of grabbing hair or touching the people around them. So they're already wanting something in their hand. Give them something that is more appropriate, all right? I was at a conference I was speaking in Orlando. I had a person run down the hallway and hug me. I'm like, I have no clue who you are, right? But this individual said, "You saved our youth group." I was feeling pretty good about this now. It's like, seriously? She had gone to the behavior management section that I had done there. And one of the things I talk about is enforceable statements. This is the bottom line. If I would look at an individual, what's your name, sir? Tyson, if I looked at you and I said, "You need to sit down," and you were standing up, what are my choices to get you to sit down if you don't want to do it? I would have to force you to do it, right? So I don't want to do that. That wouldn't create a very good relationship, nor is that a good thing to do. But I have to look at what I can control. So if I need the group to sit down, I might say something like this. I am going to explain tonight's activity when everybody is sitting down and quiet. Can I control that? When I start to explain tonight's activity? I could repeat it again if I wanted to. But I can't control you need to sit down as much as I can control when I start talking. Does that make sense? So you have a whole bunch of those in your handout. This woman said, "I'm telling everybody," that one phrase, "I am going to begin when everybody is listening." You might need to equip peers and leaders. I hope just having a little bit of information about sensory differences is helpful for you, right? Imagine, what kind of stuff do they need to know? We've got a pile of this stuff because at CLC Network, we just want to resource volunteers. We want to resource the frontline people. So what do peers need to know? What do the volunteers need to know? We have lots of tools for you. Another thing to remind you of, would you want to do your pink thing all day long? Doesn't sound like a very good time. Find out what's green for that person who has some challenging behaviors, and you know what? Make sure you let that person do their green stuff when they're with you. That is going to totally change the fabric of what they get to do when they're at church and with you. I wanted to give you a few defensive moves, and you know what I'm talking about, right? If a person does something and you need to respond, okay? To me, do you agree with me now? You've got the ball with offensive behaviors. You can set up so many environments for success without responding to anybody's misbehavior or challenging behaviors. But I wanted to give you a few thoughts in this category, and here we go. I always thought, when I was a children's ministry director, that the behavior of the one may not interfere with the learning of the whole. If that's happening, it's time to do something, okay? It's time to get a plan, it's time to get more information, it's time to to react in some way. And so, again, we're not talking about you're out, don't ever come back to this church again. We're talking about we need a plan in place, right? And I think another thing is it's always best, as I said, to use a behavior plan that's already in action and working. And you might need to get some extra help. Call in some people that can help you brainstorm. We'd love to come alongside your church community and help you if you would like some resources in this area. The other thing, just a word about language. When you're talking with individuals, I always like to remind people, make sure you say what you want that person to do. I work with so many individuals for whom language is spotty. And so let's just imagine you only really tuned into the last 3 words of this long sentence. You know what? I can't believe, you guys, I have to say this over and over every week. It just seems ridiculous to me that you don't know by now that you should not hit your friends. What did you just hear? And I know some people who will rehearse that over and over and over again until it becomes a really good idea to try, okay? So much better to poise language so that it's more about keeping our hands to ourselves, or keeping our feet on the floor, or keeping the liquid in your mouth. And you can ignore a behavior. You could interrupt it. You could redirect it by pulling out that gift or a spray bottle. You could give people a break time. I like that way better than time out, right? Hey, let's take a break, because some people truly do need a break from that space. Natural consequences, and I've even used this with interactions between people, real simplistic idea, but I would just draw a face on a piece of paper and I'd put person crying, real simple figure, and said, you know what, the words you were using really made this person sad, and I'd draw an arrow and put a happy face, said, what are you going to do to turn that person's face around? So becomes their responsibility. It's a natural consequence of what happened to turn this person into a happier person. You rip stuff up and throw it on the ground, you need to pick it up. Okay, so natural consequences of what happens. Sometimes you can delay things. Be careful with this, and I'm not talking about most individuals, but I want to give you a tool that works with some people who need to care a little bit more, okay? So let's try this one on for size. You know what? We just had a really tough day today, didn't we? And I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure what to do. So I'll get back to you on that. Don't worry about it in the meantime. I'll get back to you about what we're going to do. You just don't even think about it. You have a good night. Or maybe the next time, I'm still not quite sure what I wanted to do. I might have to call a few people for some suggestions. But in the meantime, don't even worry about it, okay? Now, you need the right person. If you have a highly anxious individual, you would never use that. But if you need somebody who needs to care a little bit more, it might be a tactic you could try. If you have somebody who wants to argue with you, we allow people to go on the youth group retreat who have worked 3 service projects. But I told you I couldn't come to the one. We allow people to go on the youth group retreat who have worked 3 service projects, right? So you're repeating that standard. Or just say, I respect you too much to argue with you. Sometimes you can move people to a different environment. You know what? It is no problem for you to continue that behavior, because I've made arrangements with the 2nd grade Sunday school teacher, and they've got a spot for you in that place, okay? All right. You can ask questions. This is one of my favorites. Were you planning on doing that all semester or just today, right? How do you want to handle this? Or what ideas do you have? What are you going to do? But trying to get people to add to that pool of ideas, trying to promote the idea of self-control, okay? So those are just a few things that you might put together on how I'm going to respond if something does happen. But I wanted to remind you of one final one as I close this time, and just to remember the idea of prayer. Offensively, have you prayed over that space? Have you prayed for individuals? Have you asked for God's intervention? And I've also had one individual who really struggled with self-control, and I didn't say, you better be good or we're going to pray. That wasn't it. But I would offer to do that. I said, would you like it if we prayed together? And it was really neat. He came in all upset one day, made his way to me, and he said, you know what? I'd really like it if we could pray today, that God would give me self-control, that there's always someone that you can go to be able to do that.